Douglas Henschel.
Hi, how you doing?
Hello.
Well, thank you. Do you buy into this notion that television has never been so good?
No.
Really?
I think if you're talking about American television, then very possibly. And I think they made a decision a number of years ago to actually stake a claim with the rise of reality television and all those kind of substandard, cheap kind of programming in order to kind of find a niche for drama, as a deliberate policy. And I think that's paid huge dividends for them. I'm not entirely sure whether or not we are following that lead. There is some very good television in Britain at the present moment, but I heard a horrible figure last week that 75% of new drama that's being commissioned is crime drama. And I think, 75, I mean, when you take, shows like, Line of Duty and Happy Valley, they're great programs, but I'm not entirely sure whether 75% is a good number. And I mean, it happens across the industry. I mean, if you look at the predominance of Marvel comic movies and superhero movies, it's like if you find a genre that's successful.
Be careful what you say, Douglas. This is an enormous fan. This gentleman here is
Sorry.
an enormous
Oh,
fan.
sorry.
Well, I just wonder when we're going to stop being punished for the terrible teenage years that geeks and nerds had. That we're having to put up with all of these superhero movies. But I mean, I think it's once you discover a genre that's successful, then executives want more and more and more of it. I would just like to see a little bit more diversity within what's been made, and I come at that as somebody who's in crime drama. That's Shetland's my bread and butter, and I'm going to be coming up to Scotland to do another show that's again is a crime drama.
Yeah.
The irony.
Yeah.
Shetland, though, has been a big success. Third series just not long finished, available now on DVD. What do you think has the success of it? Where does it lie? What's contributed to that?
Well, I mean, apart from the most obvious one is the kind of slight novelty version of it being set in Shetland, which I'd certainly never been there before we shot that. I doubt I would be prepared to bet some money that most people hadn't been there, and lots of people didn't know what it was, even where it was properly, because it's always been in that wee box slightly at the top of the town because there isn't enough room for it.
Just as a side, when we launched the National, we had a map of Scotland in the masthead, and we didn't include Shetland in it. We got,
well, understandably, you got
quite rightly. I'd like to publicly apologise.
Again.
But apart from the novelty of the Isles themselves, I think obviously also the characters that Anne Cleeves created. I think Jimmy Perez is a great creation on her part, and also the creation of the character of Tosh, who isn't in any of the books, and that was David Kane's invention. I think the characters are likeable. The situation that they're in is likeable. And then, the ambition of the show itself has grown from being a two-part procedural into this latest series, which was one story over 6 hours. And I think that gave us far more room to investigate the more human side of these characters. And I always think that draws people in because it makes you emotionally attached to them if you see them in some kind of danger or some kind of situation. So I think the ambition of the show has been grown, and I think that has borne fruit in the last series. I think people have really taken to us,
It's quite dark. It's not as dark as some crime series, but there's a dark side to it. And the third series, for instance, there's a lot to do with drug taking and the drug trade there. A bit.
Yeah.
I was wondering why that went down in Shetland itself.
Well, that'd be an interesting question actually to spend a wee bit of time on, because, well, not for me because I'm not hugely knowledgeable about it, but I know that there is a drug problem, a quite serious drug problem in Shetland, and so we weren't kind of foisting that on the Isles. I mean, I think anybody from Shetland would actually stand up and agree that is a problem that they have. We didn't dwell too long on it. That was more of a segue into another avenue of the story. But I think it was certainly valid part of the story of the Isles.
Did you feel a responsibility to people in Shetland to be authentic to an extent?
Well, No, I don't feel that they're. I mean, I think that the if any responsibility that we have is to try and show the Isles as they are, and not to we weren't putting any stories on top of them. There was no kind of I didn't think we disrespected any of the people there. I mean, as far as authenticity is concerned, I mean that is a bugbear, because people say, like, where are the Shetland accents within the show? And to a certain extent, I get that, because if you're going to set a show there, and if people from there are going to watch it, then they want to feel represented. But the difficulty that we had is the fact that on a place that's got a population of about 23,000. The percentage of professional actors that you're going to get out of that is going to be very small, and we've used, almost all of them, and we would be delighted to use more if there were more there. Also, the other difficult thing is the Shetland accent is so distinct and very difficult to master. It's because it's almost more of a dialect than just an accent, and I think then there's been a couple of actors that we've had come in who have given it a bash, and I don't want to say anything, but it's
no names.
It's that shows how difficult it is, actually. And I think if you had a whole show full of actors coming in having to try and recreate Shetland accent, I think we would get butchered for that, because I think that would actually cause more problems than the way we're doing it just now.
In such a comparatively intimate kind of environment. I mean, there must have been some suspicion when you moved in there, and, with a crew, and and how you're going to represent the community.
Well, I think that's justified. I mean, because I think that there's been a couple of things that had gone there before that they weren't happy with, where people felt that they'd been taken advantage of a little and not shown in a true light. And so I think there was a wee bit of suspicion from local people about how are you going to represent us? How are what are you here for? What are you doing? And I think it's taken us a wee while, but we've tried very hard to show the Isles in a good light, and to be a positive force for Shetland in the way that it's represented and seen worldwide. And now I think we're part of the story of the Isles now, and we have a great relationship with people there. Obviously there are people who maybe don't like the show or don't like us, and that's fine, because that's just that's democracy. But for the most part, I think we've got a great relationship with people there.
We were talking earlier about the wealth of talent that we've got in Scotland, not just acting, but crews and writing, and what needs to be done to nurture that and encourage it and grow it into a bigger, stronger industry?
I think that's a huge question. I think first and foremost, a film studio within Scotland, a fully functional, ambitious, forward-thinking film studio is 100% necessary, and I cannot for the life of me understand why that hasn't happened yet. I'm a 50-year-old man.
In those newspapers we must have covered that story countless times. It's never come to anything.
Well, no, it's never come to anything. But I don't know whether it's just lack of foresight, or whether it's lack of understanding that a film industry in Scotland could be a force of financial good, that it's a viable business venture. I mean, the idea of having a film industry is that it pays for itself, that it's a self-funding thing, and you only get that by making films that are profitable, that then allow a film industry to properly take off. But we need studios for that to happen. There are people, we live in one of the top 5 photogenic countries in the world. People would come here in their droves if we could make it, if we had the facilities to accommodate them. The amount of, if you look at Northern Ireland, what's happened in Belfast with Game of Thrones, what's happening in Cardiff with Doctor Who, and everything that gets filmed there, and burgeoning industries happening in both of those places.
Political or commercial imagination here in Scotland?
Well, I don't want to have a go specifically at the SNP, because this isn't just the SNP government that are backwards and coming forwards. This is historically something that's happened in Scotland throughout the Labour's tenure here in Scotland. But I think it's ultimately what I think it is that it's the film industry or the arts in general are still looked as being a hobby. It's not actually looked upon as being a serious industry. I mean, the fact that there was cuts of 20 million to the arts budget in Scotland recently in John Swinney's budget, I think, where is your justification for taking 20 million away from an arts culture that would sorely miss 20 million? And, where was, 20 million, what does that actually buy you? Why couldn't that have come from somewhere else? Because we seem to have an awful lot of money to spend on an awful lot of other things. Yeah. But, the arts, sorely misses 20 million. And I think that is in keeping with that kind of attitude, that they don't really need it because it's not really that serious. And I think that's where it comes from. We have to be more ambitious in the way that we look at new industries, because if we're ever going to be an independent country, then we're going to need things like that.
In terms of the BBC, who come in for a lot of criticism, not all of it justified, absolutely. But there's been some talk about the news coverage of the BBC and the need for the Scottish Six. And also there was a survey of viewers who believed, I think a narrow majority believed, that this news coverage didn't adequately reflect the country. But for me, I think one of the things I would rather, I would like to see just as much, was more Scottish drama, because when I look at the television screens, I don't really see my country in terms of the dramatic output of the...
Absolutely, no, I agree with you 100% on that.
Why is that, you think?
I think it's because if you want something, because BBC Scotland, to the best of my knowledge, cannot commission and make shows of their own. They have to go down to London to have them greenlit there. And I think it's a structural problem within the BBC. I personally would like to see the amount of money that's given to the BBC by people in Scotland to be spent in Scotland, or at least a greater percentage of it to be spent in Scotland. And then if the BBC in London didn't necessarily want to screen that nationally across the BBC, then that's fine. Mm-hmm. But people in Scotland should be able to see it. And the same with people in Wales and people in Northern Ireland, because if you think there's no little representation of Scottish drama, you name me one that was set in Northern Ireland. Mm-hmm. Or name me more than Hinterland that's on BBC Four, I think, in Wales. They're grossly underrepresented. So I would like to see, that more, because I think it would be fair. I was on the board for a new writing competition in Scotland a few years ago, and it was when we opened it, it was kind of 20 years of Scottish drama, and I remember looking up and thinking, really, is that it in 20 years? It was so depressing. And it's not that the talent isn't there, because I read scripts that were fantastic that were sent into us. So there's certainly the writing talent there. The acting talent's been abundant. The crews that we've got here are fantastic. I've been working with crews up here for years and years and years, and they're terrific. They're as good as you'll find anywhere else in the UK.
And you're working on something else soon here. What's that?
It's about the policeman William Munsey, who was the guy who got Peter Manuel. And I remember the story of Peter Manuel because my ma used to tell it to me when I was growing up, because she was a young woman in the 50s when
I'm a Hamilton boy, so I remember, of course, very much. Yeah, and I had uncles in the police force at that. I remember. Yeah. Late uncles who were.
So that's going to be for ITV. It's a 3-part series for ITV. I'm going to be playing William Munsey. I don't know who's playing Peter Manuel yet, so I can't tell you.
Right.
But no, I'm very much looking forward to it.
And that starts when?
We start filming on the 20th of June up here.
Okay. And what about Shetland?
I'm not allowed to say anything at the present moment, but I'm very hopeful that we'll be going again next year. Okay.
Well, we hope to see that. Looking forward to that very, very, very much indeed. So now I think we're going to have some comedy. Yes. Is that correct?
Yes. We're going to hear from Elaine Malcolmson. She's a comedian, a writer, and a science communicator. Welcome, Elaine.
I get my own mic. Yes, hello everyone. Thanks for having me. It's not been a good week for legends, has it? It's not been a good week for legends. We've lost Victoria Wood, Queen of Comedy, and the Prince of Pop. Prince died at 57, which I think we think of as quite young, but it's actually quite old for someone who lived in a Paisley estate. Yeah, I think you have to be a Prince fan really to get that joke. Yeah, that's fine. I know a little bit about Paisley. Yeah, but despite the demise of the creative royalty, our own tired old British monarchy trundles on, and this week Nicholas Witchell decided that we had to celebrate the Queen's 90th birthday. I mean, we've already celebrated her having the longest reign which is basically congratulating someone for staying alive longer than people did in the past. But this week was the 90th birthday. Incidentally, if anyone's interested, I'm selling celebration £1 coins with the Queen's face on it for a £5. If anyone wants to get any of those. It was all about the stamps, though. We're getting new stamps for the Queen's 90th birthday, and everyone is very excited about Prince George, because he's 4th generation. Don't know if that makes him a royal or an iPad. I don't know if you saw the photos for the stamps. If you haven't, you should take a look, because it seems like the royals are finally taking some austerity measures. It looked like Prince George was wearing hand-me-downs from Edward VII.
Yeah.
Unless designers at Debenhams now include a range by Francis Drake. Yeah, Prince George got to meet Obama. We've spoken about Obama already. Obama was here to tell us to stay in Europe, because if Europe splits, he'd not know who to sit beside for lunch at the UN. Be awkward. And Obama, he did anger the Leave campaign, didn't he? Boris Johnson called Obama part Kenyan. Boris Johnson himself, part human. Elsewhere in the Vote Leave campaign, Michael Gove gave his big speech. It was very exciting for him. Michael Gove, the only person in the world who looks like a spitting image puppet of themselves. Michael Gove's big message was, take back control. The man can't even control his own jowls. Michael Gove also said that staying in Europe would be like being a hostage locked in the back of a car, which is frightening. There's only one thing worse than being a hostage locked in the back of a car. It's being a hostage locked in the back of a car with Michael Gove. Of course, the car would be an estate, wouldn't it? An estate registered to an offshore trust. Our big man, though, in Scotland for the Leave campaign is Jim Sillars. I feel a bit sorry for Jim Sillars. That's why I mention him now. He gets a hard time because he said in the independence referendum he wanted us to get out of the UK, and now in the EU referendum he wants us to get out of Europe. But Jim Sillars used to be a fireman. He's always going to want people to get out. Stay out. Jim Sillars. What else happened this week? Oh, meanwhile, in America, it looks like Trump's going to be the Republican candidate unless it goes to a contested convention. I think I had a contested convention once. I had to get Cavonia. But realistically, who's going to be able to stop Trump? The man has so much money, he can wear Will-o'-the-Wisp as a wig. Might be too young. You remember Will-o'-the-Wisp? Yes, okay. Anyone else, just Google Will-o'-the-Wisp. Be worth it. Be worth it. And it looks like it's Clinton for the Democrats, doesn't it? Unless Bernie Sanders can pull something out of the bag. God love him, though. He looks like the only thing he could pull out of a bag is a tired old sandwich with the crusts cut off and a spare pair of socks. So yeah, it's looking like Clinton and Trump, which sounds like a gastropub in Finiston. Where we'll all go to later, no doubt. But yeah, that's all for me. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So now we're moving on to the
Europe discussion.
EU discussion.
Indeed.
Could we welcome to the stage, please, Alan Smith, SNP MEP, and Anna Cabrera.
Hello there. Hello there. If we could start, Alan, with yourself. You have compiled a wee blue book, which I guess deals with very many of the issues around Europe and puts forward the case for staying in very many ways. What was the main, that presumably was the main purpose, just to address issues that people have been raising with you?
Very much so. I mean, the focus obviously is the Holyrood election, and I'll be out campaigning later on to do the Both Votes SNP thing, which we discussed earlier on. But we have produced this quite specifically. This Lee Bleu book, BLEU, which we a pun on a previous Blue book as well, to educate people, because people are now doing what they did during the referendum on independence, which was, I want to know more about this. I want to understand what's going on. Why don't I know this? And it's not been for want of trying, I have to say. I've been an MEP for 13 years, but it would be difficult to say that the MEPs trouble the nation's consciousness that often. Yeah. But we all tweet, we all have websites, we're all putting stuff out, and we're not being held to account in the way that we need to be. So we've put this together, myself and Ian Hudson, to make people aware of what's going on. We've launched a website as well at scotlandineurope.eu, which has got the facts. It's got a facility that if you want to ask us a question, you'll get an answer within 24 hours. And we're getting upwards of 20 odd emails a day from people actually asking real questions for the first time ever, I have to say, because people are making themselves aware of what's going on, because there is a dawning awareness that we're going to need to make a real decision about this coming up quite soon, after the Holyrood election.
So what are they asking most? What's bothering them? What questions are the kind of key that are coming
there is a focus on the finances, sadly, I think, and because I think the EU is about much more than money in, money out. It's an opportunity for Scotland to play a part in, as John Hume said, the SDLP politician, in the greatest war avoidance mechanism ever invented. Now, that's pretty good. Up the road from my office in Brussels, if you want big picture, you've got Flanders Field, where elite politics went wrong. And we really don't need to look far away from Europe's borders to see bits of the world where peace can't be taken for granted. And the fact that Scotland's been able to be part of that, as part of the UK, because that's the constitutional reality we find ourselves in, is a really good thing. The fact that we've got kids can go on Erasmus, the younger generation especially, Europe's not really foreign anymore. The idea of jumping on an EasyJet or a Ryanair flight to the Sun or elsewhere isn't unusual. People are studying, living, working, travelling. We've got lots of people from the EU within Scotland as well. All of this is at risk within this debate. So there's a dawning realisation that this matters and is important. Much of the questions have been about money.
In money, in terms of people believing that they're putting more into Europe than they're getting out, is that the general gist of their complaint?
It's a lot of the lines coming back to haunt us. The EU's accounts haven't been signed off for blah-de-blah-de-blah, however many years, which is a demonstrable lie. They have been signed off, which is also in there, and we unpack that as to you've been misled. And that's what we're needing to start an awful lot of the responses with, is I'm sorry you've been misled, but you have been misled. Here's the reality of it. Because it's... a lie is halfway around the world before the truth has laced his boots. It is true. So we're getting a lot of the myths are coming back. But when people get the actual facts, I find people very, very open to the, oh, I didn't know that, okay. And the response we've had to it, and I would urge people to have a look, it's really, really good, positive.
Anna, when you've been here in Scotland now for 23 years?
Almost, yeah.
And what do you feel among your circle? What is the awareness like of us being part of Europe and European issues?
Up till now, there was no much awareness. It was almost taken for granted. We are living here, we are accepted, and that was it. There was no any questions. It was more about, creating roots, be part of the culture, the society, and actually integrating. Now, there is more of a question in the back of our mind, what's going to happen to us if we come out of Europe? What do we need to do to remain here? What kind of plans do we need to put in place in order to move back? Because, for example, if I had to move back to Spain, it's very unlikely because I'm married with a Scotsman. But if I had to go back, I've been here 23 years, I'm 44, I'm been almost longer, I'm been longer here in this country than I have been in Spain. So going back there, I will have to readjust because culture doesn't stop and society doesn't stop just because I'm not there. It took a while for me to integrate, to learn the language. It'll equally take as long for me to reintegrate in a different culture, find work, find friends. It'll be hard. So yeah, it's at the back of my mind, but it's much bigger than what will happen to me, because lots of people are equally in the same predicament in Spain. Lots of British people are living in Spain. What's going to happen to them? We were talking earlier about lots of retired British people are living there because of the European Union. They have access to the Spanish national health. What's going to happen to them? Do they need to come out over here? Do they need to pay for the private medical health? It is quite tricky, and it's not one-sided. It's very complex, and I hope that people, use common sense rather than scaremongering, because there seems to be quite a lot of fear around of, foreigners are coming here, they are taking our jobs. My job was given to me because I had a set of skills that they required. Also, I had a set of skills that made me the right person for the job. If I go, the skills won't be there. Somebody else will take the job with a different set of skills, but it won't be me. And I think I bring something different to the equation. Equally, you do or you do is very individual. And in a world where we are actually, we are doing international, business, it's very narrow-minded to think that, becoming apart and becoming out of Europe is going to be good for commerce or for culture. I think it's good to be open-minded and not to be scared of people coming here, because equally they can go over there.
I mean, there's arguably never a good time to come out of Europe, but I mean, I'm just wondering, Alan's view on this. I mean, now is a particularly bad time to come out of Europe. I mean, it strikes me that there are so many fault lines there. The whole migrant refugee crisis, for example, is a point in case, and there's been a lot of friction over those issues. So, the timing would never be good, but would you agree that it's a particularly bad moment, I think, for Europe to actually exit?
But it's a bad time for a number of other reasons as well, that this is not going to be the issue that the other European leaders want to be talking about. And it sets the worst possible precedent at a time when we've really got some crunchy issues to be getting on with. So we've got the refugee crisis in the Mediterranean, where we are starting to see the member states working together much more coherently than they did. And this is the weakness of the EU, also its strength, that unless the member states align, you're not going to see concerted action. In the same way as when the UN Security Council's deadlocked, you won't see the international community operating in the way that it could. But the headlines have been gruesome, the images have been tough. We've had the situation in Ukraine, we've had the economic crisis, the euro is not out of the woods yet. There is still a lot of worrying economic numbers. Also the refugee crisis, it's not difficult to paint the EU as a failure. But I utterly reject that it is. And surely the way that we make it better is by staying in, not doing a dance of the seven veils with our hand on the exit door. It's just not credible.
Douglas, are you thinking this debate's taken off yet?
I hate the fact that we're being asked the question at all. Because this is just a vanity issue. It's David Cameron placating the right of the Tory party. It was like shoehorned into their manifesto, and because they won the election, that was suddenly taken wrongly as a mandate to be able to ask us the question. And we're being made to participate in this vanity project that shouldn't be happening at all. It's not a question that came about because the British people actually wanted either some reshaping of the way that Britain's contract within the EU. It's got nothing to do with that. It wasn't a demand of the people. It's a vanity project for the Tories. So I object to being shoehorned into this at all. And also the way that the question seems to be getting framed over here is about who would you prefer to be taken advantage of by? Would you prefer to continue to be taken advantage of by the big boys club in Brussels, or would you prefer your pain to be more localised and be taken advantage of by the big boys club in Westminster? And for my answer to that is I really don't care, because it's the same thing. The only thing is what Alan alluded to earlier, is what Yanis Varoufakis was saying last week, is that the breakup of Brexit, the only thing that it's going to hasten is the breakup of the European Union and a return to the politics of the 30s and small nation states. And then, we all know how that ended up in the Holocaust and, the decimation of a generation of our young people. And I don't want to go back to that. And so for that point alone, I would definitely vote to remain, because I think it's hugely irresponsible to do it any other way. I mean, if you want to talk about economics and finance, then that's an entirely different question and not one that I'm even capable of answering. But from a humanitarian point of view, I think it's imperative that we stay in Europe.
I think that's one of the problems that, I don't know what you feel, Michelle, but I think that it's quite hard to connect with a debate because it does go into finances sometimes in these things and you feel, I don't know enough about that. But you're looking for some emotional connection to Europe. In the same way in the Scottish referendum, there was obviously an emotional dimension to that I think you struggle to find in this.
But the workings of Europe have always been, I think in most people's eyes, quite opaque. You know, it's always been, I mean, when you talk about European Union politics, for a lot of people, they just kind of glaze over. It seems labyrinthine, it seems complicated or whatever, and it lacks that sort of human edge, you know. And that's where I think this is particularly useful, because it helps cut through, I think, a lot of the rather chewy sort of politics that lie in the background of that, and allows you to connect with the key questions. You know,
for me, it's about representation, and you can't change or reform or influence if you're not a part of something. If you're not sitting at the table, you can't influence. But we've only got 6 MEPs. And the rest of the UK is 73. Is that 73? Are we underrepresented?
No, I don't think we are.
In comparison to countries of a similar size, they would have more than Scotland. Is that right?
Because there's, well, in terms of we couldn't call it a simple thing. It's the Cambridge formula of digressive proportionality, obviously. It's
a bit chewy European politics.
Right there, we've got exactly what the problems are. Which is precisely the difficulty. The people who are into the European project are into the process, into the minutiae, into the treaties and all of that stuff. And the vast majority of people aren't. So often the way that the EU is put across and explained shuts people out. And it does seem opaque and difficult, but actually it's no more difficult than how your council passes a motion at council or whatever else. But in terms of how we would be represented as an independent state, we'd get more, because the smaller the state, the higher the per capita proportional representation of the MEPs. But truth be told, all of that's detail, and all of the benefits that we have right now are at risk. And that is starting to dawn on people that this matters. And absolutely, to Dougie's point, that a lot of resentment about, well, why are we having this? This wasn't a priority for us. My priorities are the economy, the refugee crisis, lots of other stuff. So this vanity project that's been foisted on us actually is contributing to the reticence on the side of the Remain side. That turnout, I think, is actually going to be the biggest issue. And we've seen that where turnout is low, the extremists tend to carry it.
Yeah.
And we really need to be on our toes about it.
You talk about your priorities there as a politician within that European fold. What do you think Barack Obama's priorities were this weekend when he waded into the whole debate?
Oh, I think he had every right to say what he wants to say about a major constitutional issue. The ramifications of the UK's place in the world in the event we do see an outvote will be significant. And it will be a significant rejection of multilateralism, which is what the EU actually is. It's about countries pooling sovereignty to work together towards common objectives. If a major member state rejects that, then Poland knocks on the door a few weeks after, Hungary knocks on the door a few days after that, and the whole thing starts to unravel. And the greatest exercise in multilateralism starts to fall apart. And I think globally the significance of that precedent is out there in a way that is actually not resonating in the domestic debate.
Anna, did you share that kind of annoyance at having to deal with the question when the referendum was first called, as somebody who was living here from Europe itself? Did you think?
To me, it was frustrating more than anything else, because I live here. It's going to be affected me quite directly, and I do have a say, but I don't have a vote. So it's quite annoying that I've been here 23 years, working, paying tax, being part of Scottish life, and I don't have a say in the matter. That's quite annoying.
Did it make you feel anything, less welcome because we were now talking about severing our ties with Europe?
I don't think it makes me feel less unwelcome. I'm being quite fortunate. I'm being always feel quite welcome here, but it does make you think. Are you a second-class citizen? Because I know it's not personal, because obviously it's the same for everybody who is not a British citizen. But it makes you think, when things like that happen, it makes you think. I can't vote in the general elections, and I can't vote in this referendum. I was able to vote in the Scottish independent referendum, and the local elections I'm allowed. But it annoys me because I made a point of not to vote in Spain in the national elections because I don't live there, and I don't think it's very ethical for me to be, although it's my right, I don't think it's ethical for me to be making choices about people's life when I'm not going to be directly influenced by it or affected by it. So out of principles, I don't vote in Spain. But I would like to be able to do something about it here, because whatever it happens here, it definitely affects me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the really ugly aspects of this debate, that in our independence referendum, our definition of Scottish is, do you live here? So EU nationals had the right to vote, 16, 17-year-olds had the right to vote, and we tried to make it the same for this one as well. Our guys at Westminster fought the good fight, didn't have the numbers. So we're having a discussion about 2.6 million of our neighbours in these islands. And it's, you're good enough to live here, work here, study here, work in the NHS here, whatever, pay your taxes, all the rest of it. But this isn't really a discussion for you.
I think
that goes to an ugly place really
well,
fast.
One of the amazing things about the Scottish referendum was the total lack of any notion of ethnicity or anything like that. Whereas here we've gone really quickly, and Boris Johnson, the Park Kenyon thing, we've gone really quickly to people's right to comment on things because of where they came from, where their grandparents came from. Seems crazy to me, and quite a dangerous place to go. In terms of the sort of political machinations behind it, I mean, what about this notion that this is only, I guess, to lance a Tory party boil? Is that?
I think that's how it started, and Cameron boxed himself into a corner. And I don't think Mr. Cameron has any long-term strategy or ideology at all. I think this was a short term.
Need to have because he's off.
So, well, indeed, which is all the more soul-destroying. In that, this is an act of vandalism that is going to have long-term consequences for community cohesion within these islands, in terms of people feeling exactly how Anna's feeling now. That am I welcome here? Am I not? I was speaking to French students in Paris. Strangely enough, Hochen was students from France. But one of the girls was doing a course at the LSE, and she's saying, well, I don't want to actually have my future in Britain anymore. And that is really bad stuff. And Cameron brought this about in order to buy off the extremists in his own party, but they do go Pavlovian on this stuff, in a way that other parties don't. And in Scotland, I think we have a pragmatism with this sort of stuff that is, well, if it's working, it's working. And you can do the tugging of the heartstrings as well with this is an opportunity for Scotland to shine, but we're pragmatic about it, and we like the visceral element to the debate that you do see, particularly with the Tories, particularly south of the border, and this is going to tear the Tories apart.
Although I don't know, but Douglas, do you feel? Sometimes it's like the Scottish referendum all over again. All the things that happened then are happening now again. Project Fear, exactly.
Yeah, which is why I don't like the way that the debate's being framed, because actually it's not based on any of the things that I happen to think that are important. Any of the things that Alan's been talking about just now, that's the kind of the debate that we should be having, but it's not. It's built again on how much it's going to cost you and how much, all these people coming in here, do we still want? I mean, it is being framed in such a right-wing manner, and I loathe it. I'm married to a Croatian woman who's been here, who's never claimed any benefits, who's worked from the moment an hour that she got here, and has had to go through the horrific process of applying for a visa year on year until she finally managed to get her British citizenship. But and how demeaning that is to individuals, the way that it's done here. However, I mean, the value in it being framed in such a right-wing manner should inform people as to how it would go if we were to leave the European Union, because the only people that's going to benefit are the right wing across Europe. But that's what's caused this debate, and that's what's going to continue to rise. It's only going to get worse if we were to vote to leave the EU.
So as we say, moving away from the kind of Project Fear stuff, could you share with us some of the key benefits of us remaining in the EU, little things that those who want to remain can take away and store and understand why it's so important to vote to stay?
Well, top line, remember the website, it's www.scotlandineurope.eu. We've got all the facts on there. We're producing 100 infographics of really bite-sized, accessible stuff that we're already part of this. We're represented in this. We've been part of this throughout. It is about the avoidance of war. It is about multilateralism. It is about Europe being our backyard, not a foreign country. Grand old man that I am, I remember when the Berlin Wall came down, and suddenly all these countries that were enemies suddenly were coming into the fold. And it's an amazing thing that we're part of, and it's a chance for Scotland to shine. And we can have all sorts of discussions about, does the EU work for us, how much does it cost? And economically we gain massively from being part of this. Round about 150 to 300,000 jobs in Scotland, in the real economy, directly related to trade with the EU. All of these things are under question, because I don't believe in Project Fear because it doesn't work in Scotland. And I'm perfectly willing to say, well, yeah, of course there's other ways of doing it. I spend a lot of time with Norwegians and Icelanders. There are different ways of interacting with the EU. But they're poorer options than what we've got. So let's talk about all the good stuff that we've got going on, and the fact that that's being put at risk for an internal vanity project for the Tories.
I mean, one of the best things I thought about this book was this notion that that immigrants, people who come to this country, the net benefit is so much greater than the cost.
£55 per second.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable.
Due to for the UK exchequer, for the UK economy, from the fact that we've had immigration. And this is exactly as Dougie says, that the way that the debate's being framed is actually deeply insulting to an awful lot of people.
Yeah.
And it demeans us. It really does.
Although, while all that's true, there are still some difficult questions. For me, one of the most difficult questions is, you look at the refugee crisis and you have to come to the conclusion, I think, that Europe is failing to deal with that properly. If it's failing to deal with something like that, pardon me, how can you make it do better?
Well, we need to remain engaged, and this is, as I said earlier, the strength of the EU when the member states do cohere around a common agenda is massive. But in the absence of that common agenda, in the absence of that agreement, which is why we don't have a European superstate, there's no way of forcing Poland to take a quota of refugees. There's no way of forcing Hungary to keep its borders open or elsewhere. We've not seen the member states working together on this, which is a matter of political will. So in order to remain engaged within that process and be the voice that we should be, which is where I'm so proud that Scotland's taken a third of the UK's refugee quota, such as it is, and that's not a huge amount of people. But we do need to put our shoulder to the wheel on this sort of stuff. And the countries that are most worried about the breakdown in multilateralism are the countries that do it best. It's the Swedes, it's the Danes, it's where I'd hope that Scotland would be. But you're right. I mean, in terms of the European policy response to a lot of the big issues of the day, no, it's not been where it needs to be.
I mean, the refugee issue is a point in case. I mean, you know, it's been used as collateral here, as political collateral. You know, I mean, talk to major humanitarian organisations, they're incredibly sort of angry over the way in which refugees have been used as collateral. I mean, you look at today's papers, and over the last 24 hours, you have Angela Merkel and Gaziantep on the Syria-Turkey border. You know, it's all about politicking while the refugee crisis continues to get worse in that way. You know, and you know, we need to find a cohesive way of pulling together on this. Leaving Europe, I mean, that's just going to add to the woes of it. At precisely a moment when we can expect more refugees coming here. You've got the problem in Yemen. We've been talking about Libya. You know, that problem will be exacerbated in the foreseeable future.
In terms of that kind of emotional connection, one of the ways I think people connect emotionally with things is through culture. And I know in your world or your circle is a cultural one as well as an academic one. How can you foster that feeling, I guess, that we are connected culturally to Europe in a way that maybe we don't feel so much now? Or is it true to say we don't feel that much now?
I'm not sure. I think there is evidence from DNA that we are connected to music. Jotis and Spanish jotas are just similar. Who knows where they come first from Spain to here, from here to Spain, or who knows? But definitely we are. There is, I don't know how many types of bagpipes around Europe. We are connected by instruments, and also Shakespeare's birthday. I know it's not Scottish, but you know, there is Shakespeare plays perform everywhere in Europe. We are connected, whereas we like it or no. And I think there has always been people traveling backwards and forwards, and there would always be people trying to either make a new life somewhere else for whatever reason, for political reasons, for economic reasons. It's going to happen. I just think embracing something like that, rather than being scared about it, is quite important.
How do you think, anybody has got any ideas or interested in that, how do you think we could try and underline that and emphasise that and try and celebrate it? Because I don't know personally whether we celebrate it enough.
Well, Celtic Connections is a great place to celebrate not European but internationalism, and so is the international festivals. I mean, Scotland's got one of the greatest numbers of international festivals. If that's not just something to look at and to kind of embrace, I don't know what it is.
I heard a column by Kenny Ferguson about 2 weeks ago, and he was talking a bit about this, and he was bemoaning, I think, the lack of, so far anyway, a lack of events to celebrate. And he suggested a big festival with, I guess he mentioned Daft Punk, because Daft Punk is the biggest European band, I guess.
But don't we already have that? It's called the Edinburgh Festival.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
we do that, yeah.
You know, I mean, in London, you know, in the theatre scene in London, Ivo Van Hove, who's, you know, one of the most celebrated European directors, created A View from the Bridge, which is one of the biggest theatrical sensations that's happened in London in a decade. And that was a Dutch director coming to London to the Young Vic Theatre, which is not a huge theatre in London, but it's very innovative. And you know, it's the kind of poor cousin of the Bristol Old Vic, of the Old Vic in years gone by, and is now a very innovative theatre of its own. But it was Ivo Van Hove, who was, you know, celebrated foreign director, who came and created this thing which took the, you know, the whole of the city by storm. You know, I mean, it's already there.
Yeah. Maybe just
It's
not.
just
There is an argument that culturally we're actually quite successful at doing that. It's on a political sphere that we're probably being let
No, we
down
just
to
don't.
some
We just
extent.
don't point the spotlight in
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
direction. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's not that it isn't there. It already exists. It
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
needs more attention. That's all.
But it's also, we're not unique in this. Europe is always somewhere else, in every European country. You know, I could tell you Belgian politicians who talk about, and then I went to Europe. Yeah, hang on, you're Belgian, you're in Europe. Yeah. We could at least almost justify the idea that we're going to Europe. But the amount of times I'm asked by other politicians how are things over in Europe, Europe is somewhere else. You know? And Europe is the conglomeration of some of the oldest nation states in the world now working together. But there isn't a European demos in the sense of what does a European look like, what does a European eat, what does a European sound like.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I think it's quite healthy.
I think it is about the working together in all our diversity. So on the cultural side of things, and I read Kenny's piece with interest, but if politicians are starting to are trying to use culture as a
Yeah,
tool,
exactly.
it gets really clunky,
Yeah.
and I don't think it works. I mean, we do have Europe Day on the 9th of May, I believe it is. And even I'm not quite sure where it is, because all the events are a bit plasticky and a bit clunky, and they don't really work. And nice idea, but it doesn't really scan. And the big thing for me is the fact that we can now go from the Algarve to the Arctic Circle without a visa, without any great fuss. We've got rights when we get there. Likewise, we can receive people from a vast range of historic enemies into Scotland and make their lives here, and that's just an amazing thing for us to be part of.
We've talked all around this, and we've not mentioned yet, quite rightly, I think, because we don't want to give it too much prominence. We haven't yet mentioned the Scottish independence question and what would happen in the event of Brexit. I guess in the Sunday Times today, there's a small story which suggests that the support for for Scottish independence after Brexit is slightly dipping. I mean, very, very slightly dipping. Is it politically? Is it difficult for SNP politicians to say, yeah, we believe it? I suppose yes, there's a chance that there would be a rise in support for independence if there was Brexit, but despite that, we don't want to leave Europe. Is that?
There's two ifs in that scenario,
Yeah.
and I think that's so far away from where we actually are that we can only speculate. As I'm stoating about the country on the Holyrood campaign, because that is really very much the focus, the EU issue is out there, but I don't think it's close to anybody's heart. So the idea that there would be a mass wave of resentment at us being dragged kicking and screaming out the EU, I don't quite see it. And I don't quite see it because I don't think it's the priority for a lot of people that I think it should be, frankly, but I don't think it is. So when we're saying that we want to see a substantial turnout, a substantial Remain vote in Scotland and indeed the UK, we do mean it. And the idea that this would trigger anything, I just don't see it. And we are working with SNP London branch. They're really keen on this, but to produce, this is very much a Scottish perspective publication. They want to produce something for the UK as well. From the SNP's perspective, actually I think we're the most pro-EU party in these islands. And I think we can do a bit of leadership south of the border as well with this sort of stuff.
So what are we going to see in the next few weeks or months in terms of campaigning? Are there going to be events that people can go to, or is it going to be localised discussions, or what?
Well, there's the Scotland Stronger In campaign, which is the non-party, apolitical Remain camp, which is doing very well, I have to say. I think in Scotland they've struck a different sort of tone to south of the border. It's explicitly not Project Fear. It's about all the good stuff that we've got is now at risk. The individual parties are doing their own thing. So we've got SNP for In, SNP Stronger In campaign, which will be doing a series of meetings up and down the country, activating our guys. I hope that this is going to be very much part of that picture in terms of informing people about where we are. But each of the parties will be doing their own events, which is where this is such a curious debate, that you've got on the same side of the agenda the SNP, Labour, nominally the Tories, Lib Dems, Greens, and lots of others as well. So on the outside there really isn't that many, which is where it's such a curious debate, because there is a lack of red meat in terms of the debate.
Indeed, but we'll be returning to the debate in future
We will,
weeks.
yes. Speaking to those who would want to leave
Indeed,
Brexit.
yeah. And if you have got anybody who you want to appear on the show, any suggestions, get in touch with us, and we'll return to it in the coming weeks. And that's us for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you come back next week. And good morning, or afternoon, sorry. Good afternoon. Okay.
Probably.
Are we done?
Good. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.